Good afternoon. Happy Hanukkah. It's Thursday, December 29th. I'm Aryeh O'Sullivan, and this is IBA News broadcasting from Jerusalem. U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry's address was not only disappointing, but was almost an unbalanced as anti-Israel resolution passed at the UN Security Council last week. So said Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu last night in a televised address shortly after Kerry's speech. In a scathing response to the Secretary of State, Netanyahu said Kerry opted to attack the only democracy in the Middle East, focusing his speech on Israeli settlements instead of the root of the conflict, the Palestinian opposition to a Jewish state anywhere.
Secretary Kerry paid lip service to the unremitting campaign of terrorism that has been waged by the Palestinians against the Jewish state for nearly a century. What he did was to spend most of his speech blaming Israel for the lack of peace by passionately condemning a policy of enabling Jews to live in their historic homeland and in their eternal capital, Jerusalem. Israelis do not need to be lectured about the importance of peace by foreign leaders. Israel's hand has been extended in peace to its neighbors from day one, from its very first day. We've prayed for peace. We've worked for it every day since then. Secretary Kerry said that the United States cannot vote against its own policy. But that's exactly what it did at the UN. And that's why Israel opposed last week's Security Council resolution, because it effectively calls the Western Wall occupied Palestinian territory, because it encourages boycotts and sanctions against Israel. That's what it effectively does. And because it reflects a radical shift in U.S. policy towards the Palestinians on final status issues, those issues that we always agreed, the U.S. and Israel, have to be negotiated directly, face-to-face, without preconditions. That shift happened despite the Palestinians walking away from peace and from peace offers time and time again.
Just 23 days before the end of his tenure, U.S. Secretary of State Kerry devoted 70 minutes last night revealing his vision of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and steps to end it. The majority of his speech focused on Israel and the settlements in Judea and Samaria, saying it is their very existence that prevents the sides from achieving peace. He also attacked the regulation bill and defended America's stand last week at the UN Security Council in the vote against Israel. While offering some criticism of the Palestinian Authority, Kerry said it is Israel's occupation that is killing all chances of reaching a peace deal with the Palestinians.
The United States did, in fact, vote in accordance with our values, just as previous U.S. administrations have done at the Security Council before us. And we cannot properly defend and protect Israel if we allow a viable two-state solution to be destroyed before our own eyes. The two-state solution is now in serious jeopardy. The truth is that trends on the ground, violence, terrorism, incitement, settlement expansion, and the seemingly endless occupation, they are combining to destroy hopes for peace on both sides. They have a choice. They can choose to live together in one state, or they can separate into two states. But here is a fundamental reality. If the choice is one state, Israel can either be Jewish or democratic. It cannot be both. The Israeli Prime Minister publicly supports a two-state solution, but his current coalition is the most right-wing in Israeli history, with an agenda driven by the most extreme elements. The result is that policies of this government, which the Prime Minister himself just described as more committed to settlements than any in Israel's history, are leading in the opposite direction. Among the most troubling illustrations of this point has been the proliferation of settler outposts that are illegal under Israel's own laws. They're often located on private Palestinian land and strategically placed in locations that make two states impossible. Now leaders of the settler movement have advanced unprecedented new legislation that would legalize most of those outposts. For the first time, it would apply Israeli domestic law to the West Bank rather than military law, which is a major step towards the process of annexation. When the law passed first reading in the Israeli parliament in the Knesset, one of the chief proponents said proudly, and I quote, "Today, the Israeli Knesset moved from heading towards establishing a Palestinian state towards Israeli sovereignty in Judea and Samaria."
Speaking to reporters shortly after Kerry delivered his speech, U.S. President-elect Donald Trump declared Israel is being treated very unfairly. He also took the United Nations to task for its disproportionate treatment of Israel. Shortly before Kerry's speech, Trump, on his Twitter account, urged Israel to stay strong.
I think you know what I believe. I'm very, very strong on Israel. I think Israel's been treated very, very unfairly by a lot of different people. You look at resolutions in the United Nations, you take a look at what's happened. They're up for 20 reprimands, and other nations that are horrible places, that treat people horribly, haven't even been reprimanded. So there's something going on, and I think it's very unfair to Israel. Thank you very much.
Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas reacted to Kerry, saying he believes peace is achievable if Israel halts all settlement activities.
President Mahmoud Abbas followed with great interest tonight Secretary of State John Kerry's speech and reiterated his full commitment to a just peace as a strategic option, and said the minute the Israeli government agrees to cease all settlement activities, including in East Jerusalem, and agrees to implement, on the basis of reciprocity, agreements signed, that the Palestinian leadership stands ready to resume permanent status negotiations on the basis of international law, relevant international legality resolutions, including the recent Security Council Resolution 2334/2016.
Joining us now in the studio is Jerusalem Post columnist Amotz Asael, who will discuss U.S. Secretary of State Kerry's speech and Israel's response, and refer to some of the topics that helped shape 2016. Amotz, welcome.
Hi, Ari.
So, Amotz, U.S. Secretary of State, he has just 3 weeks left in his job. Why the timing? Is this going to have an impact?
I don't know about the impact, but the timing evidently reflects a deep sense of frustration, not only on the narrow Israeli-Palestinian front, but more broadly in terms of the entire Obama administration's record on foreign affairs, which is evidently one of the most least impressive, not to say horrendous, in American history. This American administration's diplomatic operation has failed to stem or even to just detect in advance Russia's belligerency in Europe proper. It failed to block in advance China's growing belligerency in the South China Sea at the expense of the Philippines, Japan, Korea, and Vietnam. And it failed, obviously, to see what was going to happen in the Middle East, how it would unravel and destabilize and export to Europe an unwanted immigration that is destabilizing Europe itself, crowned by the Brexit vote, for which Obama expressed personal opposition and which the British voter disregarded. These are major failures of this outgoing administration, and in its frustration, it now turned here and took out of context the Israeli situation and blew it out of proportion.
So in just 3 weeks' time, Donald Trump will be taking over as president. Do you think that he will be as good as a friend to Israel as the Israeli leadership believes he's going to be?
Emotionally, certainly, but programmatically, we haven't the faintest idea what the man's actions will be. But one thing we can, I think, still assess, and that is that ideologically speaking, he completely lacks the inclinations with which his predecessor arrived in office. He did not spend years hobnobbing with Harvard liberals, nor did he go to any kind of church where the pastor habitually attacked Israel. This is not where Donald Trump comes from. This is a co-builder of Manhattan's skyline who was personally appalled by what happened there in 9/11 and emerged from that experience as anti-Islamist, as he so manifestly is. And this is besides the fact that the circles with which he hobnobs, namely the New York-based business and political circles, are very pro-Israeli and often also Jewish.
So we're wrapping up 2016. As we look back the past year, and we're looking at the major news events. Would you say that the knifing wave of knifings in Israel is a major event that shaped the society?
I think that looking back at this particular year, and without at all saying anything about what's ahead of us, because I have not the faintest idea where we're headed in terms of violence, but in terms of 2016, what initially seemed like a serious wave did peter out, and the security services here did find ways to confront it. And by the year's end, it proved to have had no strategic effect whatsoever on the broader situation. I would say that about the knifings. I would say at the same time that the big event here in Israel this year was something that people abroad are completely unaware of. It's in the economic sphere, and it is the downfall of the tycoons, the so-called tycoons here, meaning that, for instance, Eliezer Fishman, until recently, the great plutocrat who owned the Jerusalem Economic Corporation, reached effectively bankruptcy. It means that Moti Zisser, who built 50 malls in Europe and was also one of Israel's biggest real estate developers, sadly died of cancer at 60 after having lost his major assets, including his own home. Mm-hmm. And it means that Nuhi Danknor, who was the big kingpin and mogul of corporate Israel, has lost all his assets, also reached the brink of bankruptcy, and now is also on his way to jail for share manipulation.
Interesting. What about looking at the international news year, Donald Trump's election?
Well, Donald Trump's election was certainly the most dramatic event, but I would say that the most important event, because we don't know yet what Trump will do, but the most important event, which indeed has impacted the international system, has been the emergence of the Russian bear from 25-year hibernation. Russia, which many people very prematurely eulogized as a world power in the aftermath of the Cold War, in this elapsing year emerged as a power to contend with. It became the dominant power in the Middle East. It stood up to the European Union, which it felt was provoking it in Ukraine, and it reasserted itself and can no longer be ignored. And it did this while also bringing down on its knees Turkey, after Turkey tried to stand up to Russia when it downed a Russian fighter plane. Mm-hmm. This means that the elapsing year was the year of the Russian bear.
Well, it's interesting what's going to happen with Russia in 2017. Amos Hasael, thanks so much for joining IBA.
Thank you, Aryeh.
The Jewish Agency and Immigration Ministry has released its preliminary aliyah, or immigration figures, and says that some 27,000 Jews arrived in Israel in 2016. This is 4,000 less than in a previous year. Topping the list of countries on immigration were Russia, Ukraine, France, and the United States, all which saw a slight drop in numbers compared to 2015. Aliyah from Brazil increased significantly with the arrival of some 760 new immigrants this year, as opposed to 497 last year. 2/3 of all immigrants were under the age of 40. In a surprise move, former Environment Minister Avi Gabay announced he was joining the Labour Party. Gabay was a member of Moshe Kahlon's Kulanu party, but quit in protest over the sacking of then Defense Minister Moshe Ya'alon. The former Director General of Bezik brings with him a record of success and is reportedly considering vying for the leadership of the Labour Party. His entry into Labour drew a slew of favorable responses from the party, who believe he could breathe fresh air into the Labour Party. Attorney General Avichai Mandelblit is expected to instruct police in the coming days to turn the examination of Prime Minister Netanyahu into a full-blown criminal investigation. This according to a Channel 10 report, which said that Netanyahu will be questioned under caution in the coming days. The report said the Prime Minister will be questioned on two affairs being investigated by police, the details of which have not yet been released. The Justice Ministry and police neither denied nor confirmed the report. At the same time, the daily Yediot Achronot reported today that Mandelblit will instruct police to close some of the probes they have been conducting on Netanyahu, saying no evidence was found that offenses had been committed. And former Ashkenazi Chief Rabbi Yonah Metzger has reached a plea bargain with the state prosecutor over corruption and bribery charges to the tune of 10 million shekels. The former chief rabbi will plead guilty to fraud, theft, conspiracy, breach of trust, money laundering, and receiving bribes in exchange for a reduced jail sentence. The deal reached is the result of months of negotiations between Metzger's attorney and the state attorney's office. Metzger stepped down as chief rabbi in July 2013 because of the police investigation against him. Hanukkah is the Festival of Lights, and a new art exhibit is opening in Tel Aviv next week based on illuminated cables. The artist is American-born Debbie Ulu, and the solo exhibition entitled Penetration opens at the Tirosh Gallery next Thursday and will run for a month. I spoke to her earlier this week.
There's illuminated cables that is the central focus of each sculpture, and those represent our inner essence, or our soul, if you'll say, and they combine with different objects that have stories. And the stories behind those objects and the visuals that those objects represent combine and intertwine with these illuminated cables to create what I feel is the essence of the person.
Well, how did you come up with this idea of the illuminated ropes, cables?
Lights have always been fascinating. To me, it's always been interesting, the whole connection of people, but I don't really like representing people for the way they look on the external, whether they're large or fat or skinny or what color or what their age is. So I really tried to find materials that to me were very earthly, yet beautiful, that could represent the inside of who people are.
Is there something erotic about this art? I mean, the ropes, the name Penetration?
Well, penetration, it is sort of a play on words, but penetration is really to go past something, to get inside. So if you look at the real definition of it, this is what these portraits are. It's going past our outer skin and inside. And yes, there is, some of the pieces are more, may have some parts be more erotic than the other pieces, because some people simply are. That is the essence of who they are, but not all of them.
Well, can you tell me, is there any particular artist or someone that you trained with that had a lot of impact on you?
I would have to say that, in one sense, I mean, if you look at Picasso, the way that he would take figures and break them up into different pieces and mix them up so that you didn't know what was up and down and where the noses went is kind of similar in a way to what I'm doing and trying to do. I mean, obviously, I'm not comparing, but I'd have to say I really respect him. And of course, there's Louise Bourgeois, who in the States, a woman who just made outstanding artwork and sculpture that really, to me, I connected very strongly with her work because she was such a different thinker from her time.
Debbie, you're part of the contemporary Tel Aviv art world, and you're an immigrant. How much has being an immigrant led to your success here, or impacted?
I don't think it's actually added to my success at all. I mean, I had to get through that barrier. I had to learn the whole culture here. You know, everybody speaks English, so it's not difficult, but I speak Hebrew as well. I don't think it really made a difference.
Well, artists have a lot of medium that they work with. What's your favorite medium?
I don't really have a medium. To me, every material is a language, and each material has its own language, whether it's glass or lights or wood or painting or photography or video. Each one transfers something else, a different message through that medium. So I really don't like to categorize myself.
So we are celebrating the Festival of Lights, Hanukkah, and you have illuminated ropes. Is that connected in some way?
Well, you know, Hanukkah is really one of the main things about Hanukkah. It's getting past the materialism and into the spirituality. And light always represents the spirituality and our desires to be more spiritual and enlightened. So yes, I see a direct correlation.
So Debbie, tell us, where is the show opening?
The show is opening in Old Yafo in Galeria Omer Tirosh, which is in Kikar Kedumim. And the opening is Thursday, January 5th, and the show will be open for a whole month. So I'd really like to invite everyone to come and see and be illuminated.
Get to those gasoline pumps soon, because at midnight Saturday, gasoline prices will increase by 3.3%. The cost of 95 octane at the self-service pump will be 6 shekels and 60 in Argarot, and 6 shekels 35 Argarot if served by the station attendant. Marking the 5th candle lighting of Hanukkah, members of the public, parents, and children gathered in Tel Aviv's Rabin Square last night, where they endeavored to form the world's largest human menorah, which they hope would be put into the Guinness Book of Records. The event was initiated by the Tel Aviv municipality and Chabad. In local money matters, shares were down on the Tel Aviv Stock Exchange, while the shekel was mixed in foreign currency trading. Here are the numbers. Turning to the weather, and it'll be partly cloudy with not much change tomorrow, but on Saturday it'll be cold and rainy with snow expected in the Golan Heights. Here are the expected highs and lows at home and abroad. That's our broadcast for today. We'll be back on Sunday with all the latest news from Israel. Please join us again in 2017. Until then, happy Hanukkah, have a great weekend, and a Shabbat Shalom from Jerusalem.